Hey guys, welcome to Bible Fun with the Dunns. Today we're studying Judges chapter 17. Let's get started.
Okay. Judges chapter 17 is the changing point in all the things we read in the book of Judges. Everything before this has been about actual judges, but everything after this is just little bitty stories along the way. As a matter of fact, you could kind of put it in the category of... That was a lot of thunder. Okay. So you can put it in the category of this is like an appendix. This is an add-on to the book. These things didn't necessarily happen at the end of the book. They probably were events that were happening all throughout. What you also need to know is that all of the stories we're about to read from here to the end of the book have to do with the Levites. And the Levites were the special tribe within Israel that was responsible for serving God. And the idea is that of all the things that must have happened in the country, why were they just telling stories about Levites? Because if these are the ministers and this is how they're acting, then let's wonder, like, how are the farmers acting? How are the bakers acting? How are the people who had nothing to do with God? How bad must they have been if these ministers were acting like this? So that's what to keep in mind when you read through this story. Now, the story begins with a guy named Micah. Micah, it comes along, and here's what happens. One day, somebody stole a lot of money from his mama. It says here in the story, it was 1,100 shekels. That comes out to be about 28 pounds worth of valuable metal. And look, in any economy, that's a lot, and that's a lot of money. And so when it got stolen from his mama, she noticed, and she decided she was going to put a curse on. And how she was going to do that, we're not sure. But she was going to put a curse on whoever stole her money. Well, her son, Micah, hears it, and he comes to her and he said, Mama, I need to confess I stole your money. Well, then she says, oh, my baby's such a good boy. Let's go ahead and let's make a deal. Let's give this money to God so that you won't get cursed. So not only was Micah not a good guy, but he was a superstitious guy. Not only did they talk about God, but they didn't even really actually honor him. They didn't know what God wanted. Now there's an interesting piece that John picked up in this story. It was a good question. By the way, whenever you're reading, if you can't find like a big takeaway, you can always find something interesting, something to ask a question about, or just something that jumps out to you and you go, and we can talk about those things. John, what did you see?
So I thought it was weird how they were giving that money to God, but with that money they made an idol.
That's right.
Like, it's just weird.
It is weird. We don't expect people to serve God by doing what God said don't do. Because you remember the Ten Commandments? Mm-hmm. You remember the first one says, you shall have no other gods before me. The second one, do you remember what it says? It's about idols.
No.
You shall have no graven images. And a graven image is a what?
An idol.
It's an idol. So they're trying to serve God by doing something God specifically said not to do. Now there's a whole piece to this. Because in verse number 6, it says, in those days there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Well, here's the problem. Our eyes do not always look at things they're supposed to be looking at. Sometimes they kind of wander around. We have wandering eyes. And the land didn't have a king like we would know later. Like, who are some of Israel's famous kings?
Like David.
David, Saul, Solomon. So those guys weren't here yet. So it says that Israel had no king. But was that true?
No.
It's not technically true, because who was their king?
God.
It was God. And so since God is their king, what it's saying is they didn't have any leadership that was making them do what was right. So everybody just did what felt right. And did they end up doing good or bad? Bad. That's right. So here's the problem. They had a king. They just weren't following his rule. And they were mixing conversations about God with superstitious practices of their own culture. And they were taking kind of superstition and they were taking God and they were mixing it all together, thinking, oh, it's fine. It's all ends up, it's all going to the same place and it'll all be fine. But John, was it fine? No. And what then happens is there's a Levite who comes along and this guy Micah, he's done made an idol, and he made an ephod, which is the special apron that the priest wore. Which, by the way, he wasn't a priest; he had no business having that in his house. But he made it because he was going to try to make God fit his house. And then he invites this guy, this Levite, to come live with him. And it all comes down to Micah wanted to be in charge of Micah, and he wanted God to work for him. Does that work? No. I want you to keep reading, but just beware. The next few chapters that are coming, there's some creepy stories that are coming. So they're interesting, but they show us just how bad it is when a society or a heart drifts from God. Keep reading. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.